up, guys? Welcome back to Life on the Wrist. I hope you guys are doing well today. This is a continuation of one of our series where we explain complications. It's called Complication Explained. Makes total sense, the name. Where we basically explain some of the different complications that can be put into watches and give you an idea of their history, some examples, go over some examples of them, explain how it works, kind of the works when it comes to the complications. If you are new to the channel, be sure to hit the subscribe button if you think this would be a useful video. Also, don't forget to like the video for the complication that we're going to be discussing today, which is the triple calendar or triple date or triple calendar complication, which is I think it's an underappreciated complication. So that's going to be the complication we explain today. If you haven't seen some of our other complication explained videos, we have discussed some other complications like the power reserve, which was our last video that we made of this series, where we basically explained where the power reserve came from, as well as how the power reserve indicators can actually be laid out. And then we also described one of my favorite complications, which is the chronograph. The chronograph is obviously like a stopwatch, so be sure to check out those two videos if you want to kind of understand the format of these videos. For those of you who don't know about the history, or let's start with what the triple calendar or triple date complication really is. So for those of you who don't know, the triple calendar, triple date essentially has three types of dates that it describes on the dial. That is the month that you are currently in, the day, and the date that you are a part of. So those are the things that you're going to see on a triple calendar watch. The original complication was actually developed for pocket watches, which is obviously a theme. Pocket watches were the original timekeeping device before people decided to actually put them onto a wristwatch, put the watch onto their wrist. So this complication was originally meant for pocket watches, and as you can probably imagine, it was extremely useful for those who were utilizing it. You know, having an idea of what the month was, the date was, and the day is. Those three things are actually very key, because people, when these were produced, didn't have smartwatches which had that already on your home screen, where you could see what day it is, what time it is, what month it was. So this watch was really useful back when they were used in pocket watches, and they first appeared in wristwatches in the 1920s. This is when people started to put the complications into watches, watch movements, and then obviously putting them into those movements into wristwatches. This really did take off in the 20th century, early to mid 20th century, and the two leaders that were kind of really influential in developing this type of complication within wristwatches was Vacheron Constantin and Rolex. Vacheron Constantin is obviously one of my favorite brands, so it was really nice to see that they were leading the way when it came to triple calendar or triple date wristwatches. One of the most famous and probably most iconic triple calendar watches is the Vacheron Constantin 4240, which is considered one of the best triple calendar references, and is extremely desired by collectors. These go for extremely high prices when you think about what you're actually getting. Some examples you may have seen in auctions most recently. If you follow the auction world, or follow us where we discuss the auction world, we spoke about a Rolex 6062. One of them was actually owned by Bao Dai, which went for auction recently. So that's probably the one that you've probably seen the most, but there are some modern watches that implement this similar triple calendar complication in some of those, so it's not only in vintage watches. So just going a little bit deeper into what the actual complication is, like I said, it displays the month, the day, and the date. So you're gonna have, it is April, it is the 4th, and it is a Thursday. So those are the types of things that you would end up seeing on the dials. The thing with this complication is, though, obviously some months have different days. So that's something, let's take February, for example, with 28 days. It will not automatically change to March once February 28th passes. So in order to change that, you have to do it manually. So you have to adjust each of the settings, each of the complications, in order for it to display the correct day. So it's not going to know which months have 31 days versus 30 days or less when you consider February. So that is what you'll get in a triple date. If you want something that automatically knows, okay, February has less months, you know, there's 31 days in these months, you probably want to look at an annual calendar. An annual calendar, there is no manual changing for it except for leap years. But again, you can add a leap year indicator to an annual calendar. So there's a lot more. You can essentially add complications onto a base complication. So it's kind of like words in German. They kind of just essentially string a bunch of words together, and that is one meaning. So besides the point, essentially an annual calendar, you don't have to change the month, day, or date manually. It will automatically do that for you. Sometimes triple calendar movements have additional complications that are added to them. So a really common one is a moon phase indicator. For those of you who don't know what a moon phase indicator is, moon phase indicator essentially tells you what phase of the moon it is. I think it's a really beautiful complication. It's probably one of the most useless complications because widely, I don't think a lot of people track the phases of the moon as common as some other things like the month, but I think it's a really cool complication to have because it kind of gives the watch a little bit of a romantic feel to it. So moon phase is often added on top of a triple date or triple calendar watch, and then a chronograph is oftentimes associated with a triple date movement. We'll discuss one of my favorite triple calendar chronographs that are out there right now. Similar to the power reserve, there are many different ways that you can display the month, day, and date on one of these watches. A very simple one is probably having a day or month window. So that's essentially a cutout, a little square that's been cut out, or any type of shape that's been cut out on the dial, and then there's a wheel that's attached to the movement that obviously changes and shows you what the day, date, or month it is. So that's a very common way of laying them out. A lot of the times the date and the day are used in this display. Another way to show these day, date, and months is having subdials. So essentially a subdial with a hand that changes with the kind of like telling the time essentially. And then another way, and this is a little bit more reserved to the date, but there are other watches that have, you know, the month around the outside of the dial. You can essentially have, let's take the date for an example. You can have the dates around the outside of the dial, and you have an extra hand, an extra center hand that will point to what the date is. Like I said, there are other ways that you can display it, but those are the most common ones. It's actually common that you don't have, you know, all of your month, day, and date indications in a window or in a subdial, all of them in subdials, or all of them with around the outside of the dial. A lot of the times there's a mixture of them. So a really common one is having a window for the date and date, and then, or the date and the month, or the day and the month, and then having the date around the outside. There's a lot of ways you can do it, and I think this is where watchmakers can be a little bit more creative with how they outline them. Some of my favorites, pretty obvious, but the Vacheron Constantin 4240 is obviously one of my favorites. It was actually remade by Vacheron Constantin into their historic line, historique line, which is essentially some of their classical pieces brought to life in their modern renditions of them. So the calendar 1942 is obviously the modern rendition of that. It's really, really beautiful, but of course I love the vintage one more. Rolex 6062, which I mentioned previously. You don't see a lot of Rolexes. Rolex doesn't make watches like that right now, at least. It would be incredible if they brought that back. It would probably be my favorite release. So Rolex, if you're watching, be sure to do that. But really cool, one of my favorites, triple calendar watches. And then, like I said, you can have a chronograph movement with the triple calendar or triple date complication, and the Rolex 4767 is a really beautiful reference from Rolex that incorporates a chronograph. Chronograph's my favorite complication. Adding that in with the triple calendar or even a moon phase on top of that, I think gives the watch, it brings so much joy to me. So that's a really beautiful complication as well. Annual calendars have really been produced a little bit more just based on the ease ease of use. I think more people are inclined to get an annual calendar because of the ease of use. But there's something about a triple calendar that it deserves a shout out from us at Life on the Wrist, and it deserves your attention for a little bit so that you can appreciate it and see how it works. Just a quick note, if you are interested in the vintage versions of these, there are a lot of vintage triple calendar moon phases or triple calendar chronographs out there on the vintage market, and they're relatively cheap when you compare them to other watches of a similar price point. You're getting a lot of watch for what you're purchasing. Obviously, do your research, make sure the watch is in good condition. I'm not saying that you should just go out and buy all of the ones that you can find, but I think it's worth your time to go and look at some of them because they really are beautiful. I hope this helps you understand the triple calendar or triple date complication. If you have any questions or you have anything to add to this discussion, be sure to put them in the comment section below because they'll be helpful for everyone who stumbles across this video. Also, if you didn't do it in the beginning of the video, be sure to subscribe to the channel and like this video for the triple calendar complication. And with that said, guys, I hope you enjoyed this video, and until next time.